The story begins with Vakir van Baskerville, once a faithful dog of the Baskerville family, now kneeling before a guillotine, betrayed and wrongly accused of scheming with the demon clan. Vakir faced death as the blade loomed over him. He swore that if given another shot, he would never live as a docile dog again. To his shock, Vakir awoke moments later, not in the afterlife, but in the weak body of a baby. Confused and burdened by his small form, he found himself surrounded by the cries of other infants. It didn't take long for Vakir to understand that he was in the Baskerville family nursery. This was no ordinary rebirth. Hugo Baskerville, the family leader, entered the nursery to examine the newborns. Cold and uncaring, he dismissed the other sobbing babies as useless. However, when his eyes landed on Vakir, who remained oddly silent, Hugo's curiosity was piqued. He ordered Vakir to be taken to the notorious Cradle of Swords, a trial meant to test and mold Baskervilles. Vakir, carried to the cradle, locked eyes with Hugo, his anger burning fiercer than ever. It was clear to him now, Hugo was the architect of his downfall in his past life. As memories of his former life surged back, Vakir comprehended the full extent of his predicament. Born to an outcast branch of the family, he had endured rigorous training under dreadful conditions. Despite his unwavering loyalty and readiness to do the family's dirty work, he had been repaid with betrayal and execution, all because he knew too much. But this time, Vakir vowed things would be different. No longer would he yield to Hugo or his family's demands. Revenge blazed in his heart, but as a baby he knew his strength was limited. For now his objective would be to survive and grow strong. The Cradle of Swords offered a rare opportunity. This brutal trial was a rite of passage for Baskerville children, who were tossed into a maze of blades. Their goal was to reach the Styx River, a legendary waterway said to harden their bodies into steel. However, the river's transformative power was finite, and only the first to reach it could fully reap its benefits. With memories of his past life fueling his resolve, Vakir ventured into the labyrinth. He recollected how his siblings had once sabotaged him, ensuring he missed the river's gift. Not this time. Crawling through the razor-sharp maze, he forged ahead, disregarding the agony that shredded through his tiny form. His determination prevailed. He toppled into the Styx River. The water seeped into his wounds, saturating his bones and flesh with excruciating torment. Yet Vakir persevered. This pain paled in comparison to the suffering he had endured in his past life. The longer he remained submerged, the more his body assimilated the river's mythical might. Outside the maze, his caretakers became frantic, imploring him to surface before the river claimed his life. Meanwhile, Hugo observed with a hint of amusement. He inquired with John Barrymore, the family's butler, how long Vakir had been in the water. Upon learning it had been 7 minutes, Hugo chuckled darkly, remarking that the boy might not survive. The caretakers pleaded with Hugo to intervene, but the leader merely watched, his gaze a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. Hugo called out to Vakir, signaling that it was time to leave the river, but Vakir paid no heed. He was too focused on absorbing every bit of the Styx River's power. To him, this was an opportunity too valuable to relinquish. Even as the water started to fill his lungs and his energy waned, he repeated a single mantra in his mind: endure, endure, endure. His body was on the verge of collapse, and it appeared as though he might drown, but he refused to surrender. Just as his consciousness began to fade, Hugo pulled him out of the water. The leader's smug grin revealed a blend of amusement and approval. He jokingly remarked on Vakir's greed, noting how the boy had even attempted to swallow the river's water. As he examined the child more closely, Hugo noticed something peculiar. Vakir already had teeth, an uncommon trait for a newborn. Intrigued, Hugo inquired with the head butler about the child's name. Upon hearing it, Hugo smirked and mused aloud. A very greedy son has been born. Although still disoriented and weak, Vakir's mind remained sharp. He decided that he would use this time to grow stronger in secrecy. One day, with his own hands, he would tear his so-called master to pieces. His hatred burned not only for Hugo, but for the entire Baskerville family. He vowed to make them vanish into history, just as they had tried to erase him. Vakir's thoughts briefly shifted to the truth of his past life. He had been born as the illegitimate son of Hugo Lord Baskerville, a distinguished noble. Despite possessing remarkable intelligence from an early age, his illegitimacy had relegated him to the shadows within the family. To prove his worth, he immersed himself in the perilous arts of assassination, espionage, and warfare, earning renown by the age of 20. Yet in the eyes of the Baskerville family, he was never more than a pawn. At 30, his life took a darker turn when the gates of the demonic realm burst open, unleashing a catastrophic invasion. Vakir fought valiantly for 5 years, becoming a linchpin in humanity's defense. When the war ultimately culminated in victory, he anticipated commendation for his sacrifices. Instead, he confronted accusations and betrayal, culminating in his demise. But this time, he vowed the outcome would unfold differently. As Vakir regained consciousness lying in the nursery, he realized he had effectively harnessed the power of the Styx River. This accomplishment granted him a considerable advantage, a stronger foundation than he'd possessed in his past life. However, his reflections were disrupted by the sound of a door creaking open. A maid ventured into the room, appearing surprised to find him awake. She murmured to herself about an unusual order from Madame to place something on Vakir's bed. This piqued Vakir's interest. A gift from someone in the Baskerville family? The notion was absurd. He was an illegitimate child, hardly deserving of any benevolence. The maid withdrew, leaving behind a small box. As the lid squeaked open, Vakir's curiosity gave way to dismay. 2 venomous mambas wriggled out, their scarlet eyes fixed on him. It didn't take long for Vakir to fathom the intent behind this gift. One of the few women in the Baskerville family, referred to as Madam, had dispatched these serpents, presumably to eliminate him. The motive was apparent: rivalry. If the serpents succeeded, not only would Vakir be eradicated, but the other infants in the nursery could also succumb to their lethal venom. Vakir's fury surged as he clenched the venomous mambas with his bare hands, their squirming figures powerless against his frosty determination. Consumed by anger, he envisioned how he would someday topple the entire Baskerville family with his own 2 hands. By morning, the spectacle in the nursery astounded the Baskerville household. The young child reclined tranquilly asleep, the 2 mambas deceased beside him. Anxiety engulfed the manor, and suspicion intensified. The nannies who had been on duty that night endured brutal interrogation and were executed for neglecting their obligations. Despite the upheaval, the rationale for the serpent's manifestation remained an enigma to all except Vakir. Only he comprehended the truth. 8 years elapsed, and Vakir occupied a classroom, his mind adrift as his instructor lectured on swordsmanship's echelons. The teacher expounded on the stages. A sword novice was incapable of imbuing their blade with mana. A sword adept could instill a minuscule quantity. At the sword graduate stage, the blade exuded a fluid-like radiance of mana. Ultimately, at the apex of mastery, the swordmaster could manipulate substantial mana unreservedly. The pupils marveled in astonishment upon discovering that Sir Hugo, the mightiest among the Baskerville family, had attained the swordmaster rank. Yet Vakir, engrossed in his deliberations, scarcely registered their admiration. Instead, he concentrated on recovering the boundless vigor he had commanded before his rebirth. His coming-of-age ceremony drew close, and he discerned the urgency of the situation. The teacher, noticing Vakir's distracted manner, viewed him with respect. Vakir's robust physique, forged by his unmatched endurance in the Styx River as a baby, had not gone unnoticed. The teacher believed the patriarch, Hugo, would be pleased with his growth. Though Vakir's mind was elsewhere, he quietly calculated how many years it would take before he could slay Hugo and exact his vengeance. After class, Vakir was confronted by 3 boys, triplets who radiated arrogance and spite. They shoved him, mocking him cruelly, calling him trash and jeering about the tales of his legendary deeds as a baby, his time in the Styx River, and his strangling of the mambas. He recognized them instantly. These were Hugo's notorious trident, Highborough, Middleborough, and Lowborough, the same triplets who had once betrayed and attacked him during his escape from the family's false charges in his previous life. All 3 were 9 years old, full of youthful boldness but lacking wisdom. Their taunts persisted, but Vakir's mind was scheming. He knew these boys would grow into formidable foes in the future, and he pondered whether it might be wise to deal with them now. The triplets' leader brandished a knife, smirking as he mentioned the legend that staying in the Styx River made one's body resistant to blades. With scorn dripping from his voice, he ordered one of his brothers to grab Vakir. One of the triplets held Vakir from behind, covering his mouth. "Let's see if the rumors are true," he sneered. "If he can endure this for 3 minutes, I'll eat my hand." The others laughed in agreement, eager to test the claim. What followed left the triplets stunned. 1 minute passed, then 3, then 10. Despite their efforts to harm him, Vakir remained completely unharmed. The knife could not cut his skin. Frustrated and bored, they released him, muttering about how the legend was true. As the triplet who had been holding Vakir let him go, he noticed blood on his hand and his missing finger. Shocked, he looked to Vakir, who casually spat the severed digit onto the ground. "What are you doing?" the boy stammered, his face pale. Vakir's response was calm, his smile dark. He reminded the triplet of his earlier vow. "You said you'd eat your own hand." The other two triplets, panicking, tried to calm the situation. "Let's find a priest," they cried, hoping to reattach the finger. But Vakir wasn't interested. Instead, he calmly demanded they leave. The triplet, enraged and desperate, lunged at Vakir with a knife, shouting insults and emphasizing their age advantage. Vakir, calm and unmoving, allowed the blade to strike him, but to the triplet's shock it didn't even scratch his skin. Seizing the moment, Vakir twisted the boy's wrist fiercely, forcing him to cry out in pain. With a cold, menacing tone, Vakir reminded them that in the Baskerville family, power and skill always overshadowed something as petty as age. An evil glint in his eye, Vakir taunted the triplets, suggesting they continue their game until its bitter end. The first triplet's sobs grew louder as Vakir twisted his arm further. Terrified, the other two watched, frozen in place, but their stillness didn't last. One of the remaining triplets rushed Vakir in a wild rage, only to be met with a crushing punch that sent him tumbling to the floor. The third, unable to hold back his anger, lunged as well, but was swiftly countered with a kick to the face, knocking him down as easily as the others. The room fell into a creepy silence, broken only by the pained moans of the triplets. Vakir stood over them, his stare cold and harsh. He told them, with chilling calm, that while their injuries could heal with care, they would have to bear the pain of their bruised bodies for now. However, he offered them a grim break. One of them could leave the room. Relief flashed across the triplets' faces, and they quickly asked which one of them could go. In response, Vakir picked up a blade, tossing it on the ground in front of them. "Decide for yourselves," he said, his voice tinged with mocking humor. As he turned to leave, he issued a final, taunting comment. "Don't take too long. At least one of you should survive, right?" The triplets stared at the blade, then at each other, realization dawning that survival would come at a price. Desperation took over, and they began to fight, each struggling to grab the knife. The sounds of their struggle, grunts, shouts, and sobs, echoed through the room. From outside, Vakir listened with pleasure, knowing he had successfully driven a split between the once-united Trident of Baskerville. Meanwhile, in the Patriarch's office, the head butler, John Barrymore, delivered troubling news to Hugo Le Baskerville. The Moore clan had been causing trouble at the Ruby Mines, claiming the territory. Hugo, unshaken, assured John they would handle the matter when the clan made contact. John then shifted topics, reporting on the youth evaluations at the Baskerville Fortress. He informed Hugo that Master Vakir had earned the top score in the written tests, with the practical exam set to take place in 5 days. The Guardian Knights had cleared the area in preparation. Hesitating slightly, John finally brought up a more delicate issue, an incident involving the young masters. Hugo's expression darkened, and he asked how many had died. John reassured him that there were no deaths but detailed the injuries instead. Master Hibera's teeth had been completely broken, Master Middleborough's jaw was shattered, and Master Lobo had lost his left index finger. While the injuries had been treated, the mental scars on the boys seemed far deeper. Surprised, Hugo remarked that the Trident of Baskerville, known for their tight bond, wouldn't have fought among themselves without a major reason. John revealed that the conflict stemmed from an encounter with another young master, an 8-year-old named Vakir. Not only had Vakir caused the injuries, but he was also the highest scorer on the written test. Hugo, intrigued and slightly worried, ordered Vakir to be summoned to his office. Vakir entered Hugo's office with a calm smile, giving off an air of quiet confidence. The Patriarch greeted him, noting how much he had grown since their last meeting. However, Hugo wasted no time addressing the matter at hand, the incident with the triplets, who were now both physically and emotionally scarred. Hugo pointed out that while their physical wounds had healed with proper care, the damage inflicted on their bond as brothers was far more severe. With a steady voice, Hugo asked Vakir if he thought his actions had been wrong. Vakir, unflinching, responded with a question of his own. "What did I do wrong?" This answer made Hugo narrow his eyes slightly as he explained that Vakir had turned his brothers into a complete wreck. Yet Vakir's crimson gaze remained steady. He replied boldly, asserting that power was what mattered most and how could the stronger party ever be at fault. Hugo paused before revealing that surprisingly the triplets had already forgiven Vakir. The news caught Vakir off guard and he asked, "They forgave me?" At that moment, an old memory surfaced in his mind, a scene from his past life. A young woman, the last surviving member of a family destroyed by the Baskerville clan, had come to Hugo as a nun. Despite the pain inflicted on her family, she forgave him, citing her faith. Hugo's cold response to her echoed in Vakir's mind. Forgiveness is merely an excuse for the weak who lack the strength to seek revenge. Drawing from this memory, Vakir repeated the same idea to Hugo now, stating that forgiveness was nothing more than a way for the powerless to deal with their inability to fight back. Hugo's stern expression softened into approval, his eyes glowing faintly as he nodded at Vakir's philosophy without a hint of disapproval. Hugo turned to his head butler, John Barrymore, instructing him to allow Vakir to take whatever treats he wanted from the food storage, so long as he could carry them himself. Grateful, Vakir made a simple request: chocolates. As he turned to leave with the butler, Hugo addressed him one last time, calling him son and urging him to perform well in the upcoming evaluation, particularly against the direct descendants of the Baskerville bloodline. Vakir acknowledged the advice with a nod, but his face betrayed his lingering hatred. As Vakir and Barrymore arrived at the storage room, the butler began explaining the high quality of the chocolate available, noting that the Moore clan had gone to great lengths to obtain it. The chocolate was highly valued, even among noble circles. However, Vakir interrupted him, his tone firm, and said he didn't want anything processed. The head butler, momentarily confused, sought clarification. Vakir explained that he wanted cacao beans, specifically ones with a strong aroma. Though puzzled, Barrymore complied, having the beans brought to Vakir. As Vakir placed one in his mouth, a nearby chef explained that the beans were bloody beans, renowned for their potent scent and extraordinary yield. Just one bean could produce up to 100 liters of chocolate. The head butler watched in amusement as Vakir chewed the bitter bean without hesitation. Barrymore assumed Vakir had an unusual love for chocolate, thinking this odd approach was a means to secure more of it in the future. The chef offered to process the beans and deliver the finished product to Vakir's room, but Vakir declined, insisting on taking the raw beans with him. His strange request left the staff scratching their heads, unsure of his intentions. What no one realized was that Vakir had no interest in eating the chocolate. He had a far more cunning plan for the cacao beans, one that would play a pivotal role in the practical exam in just 5 days. Unbeknownst to anyone, the seeds of chaos had already been planted and a disastrous event loomed, one that would go down in history as a defining moment for the Baskerville clan. The Baskerville family, notoriously known as the Berserker family, has earned its reputation through the harsh training and assessments imposed on its children from the moment they take their first steps. Their lives are shaped by tough tests, designed to push their boundaries. One of the earliest challenges requires them to climb a steep hill without rest, save for carefully planned breaks. When night falls, rest is no relief. They must sleep beside the body of a beast to harden their courage against fear and prepare them for dangerous settings. This relentless routine produces fighters who are both feared and admired, but it is at the age of 8 that the true ordeal begins, the deadly evaluation. This rite of passage defines the Baskerville family's legacy and their firm hold on the land's respect. On the outskirts of Baskerville territory looms Le Rouge Idle Noir Mountain, a perilous peak teeming with creatures. It is here that the young hounds, those undergoing the assessment, gather for their trial. Shadow Dog Pavlov Van Baskerville, an instructor renowned for his keen senses and formidable presence, stood before the group of eager but cautious young masters to explain the rules of the exam. The task was straightforward but ruthless: survive for a month on the hill while hunting large and powerful monsters. The scoring system, however, added layers of tactics and peril. Survivors earned 10 points, with an extra 30 points if they avoided any lasting injuries. Defeating another contestant earned 50 points, while slaying a beast added 70 points. Fulfilling all these conditions garnered 90 points, but no one could achieve a perfect 100. Sir Hugo's decree served as a reminder that a swordsman who becomes cocky is destined to fail. Additional points could also be earned by taking the badge issued to each participant, but death meant 0 points, a grim but clear warning. Shadow Dog Pavlov cautioned against leaving the assigned area, warning of the unknown and hazardous terrain within the restricted parts of Le Rouge Idle Noir Mountain. While the creatures in the assigned area had been tamed to some extent, the mountain's forbidden zones held untold dangers. Shadow dogs, acting as both examiners and hidden overseers, would be watching the candidates, grading their actions while trying to minimize losses. Though killing was not banned, it carried a penalty, and the instructors aimed to prevent needless deaths. As the young masters awaited the bell signaling the start of the test, whispers spread through the group. Many cast glances at Vakir, murmuring about his past deeds, his legendary stamina in the Styx River, and the rumored events involving the triplets. Vakir remained calm, his face composed, while his thoughts lingered on the hill itself. He had been to Le Rouge Idle Noir before, and was no stranger to its challenges. Meanwhile, the triplets stood nearby, visibly anxious. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they glanced uneasily at Vakir, clearly rattled by his presence. Shadow Dog Pavlov offered a final wish for their success before the bell rang. The sound echoed through the mountain, marking the official start of the evaluation. Immediately, the young masters scattered in all directions, each seeking a favorable position. Some acted on planned strategies, heading for areas they believed would give them an advantage. Others opted for opportunism, trailing their peers with plans to claim their spots or their badges when the time was right. Among them, the triplets argued, each insisting on their own method to dominate the exam. Their bickering slowed them down, making their movements erratic. Shadow Dog Pavlov, observing from a hidden vantage point, noted their squabbling with a stern expression. Though he hoped to keep losses low, the disarray among the young masters hinted at the chaos to come. One shadow dog, tasked with monitoring Vakir, watched him curiously. While most contestants were scrambling for safe zones within the assigned area, Vakir took a different path entirely, heading straight for the forbidden zone. The shadow dog was startled, both by the boldness of the decision and by the realization of who Vakir was rumored to be. A prodigy since childhood, Vakir had distinguished himself time and again. Intrigued, the shadow dog followed quietly, eager to see how this exceptional young hound would fare against the mountain's unknown dangers. Vakir approached a large tree, carefully scanning his surroundings. The soft ground seemed like an ideal spot to set up camp for a while. He decided to rest, a choice that puzzled the shadow dog who had been tailing him. While the other participants were busy battling monsters or stealing points from each other, Vakir focused on more ordinary tasks, gathering wood, digging small holes, and practicing with a wooden stick. At night, he slept peacefully under the tree, completely unconcerned about the turmoil unfolding elsewhere on the hill. The shadow dog grew increasingly restless. He began to question Vakir's approach, wondering if the so-called prodigy was simply avoiding the competition rather than participating. To the shadow dog, Vakir appeared more interested in camping and preparing meals than earning points. Frustrated, the shadow dog eventually decided to abandon his post and look for more exciting candidates to observe. As soon as the shadow dog left, Vakir's expression shifted into a cunning smile. He had been waiting for this moment. Without the watchful eyes of his follower, he could finally relax and focus on his true plan. Tossing a few bloody beans into the fire, Vakir mused about the old days when camping like this was routine. He chuckled softly, remarking to himself that the meddling shadow dog was finally gone, and he had completed his preparations. The real hunt could now begin. A few days later, Vakir ventured into the restricted area, a risky zone he recognized from his past life. He scouted the terrain, his eyes searching for signs of his target. The smell of burning filled the air, a clear sign that he was close. As he moved deeper, he noticed scorched tree roots and finally burning droppings. The sight confirmed what he already suspected. His target was nearby. Towering before him stood a hellhound, a monstrous creature with flames spewing from its mouth and eyes. The beast was a nightmare given form, standing 3 meters tall and radiating sulfuric heat. Its flames could ignite anything, and once its victims caught fire, they would burn until completely reduced to ash. With a risk rating of B, the hellhound was a living disaster capable of causing havoc wherever it roamed. For a moment, their assurance wavered. In his past life, he had barely survived a meeting with one of these creatures at the age of 18. Now, as an 8-year-old, he knew facing the hellhound directly was certain death, but he wasn't here to battle the beast head-on. He had a strategy. As the hellhound jumped toward him, flames burning wildly, he dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding its jaws. He recalled its first key weakness: hellhounds could only move in straight paths. Their huge bodies and great speed made sudden turns nearly impossible. Quickly, Vakir poured liquid onto the ground, creating a shallow pool. The hellhound, charging at full pace, paused, forced to take a longer way to avoid the water. Vakir grinned, yelling out the hellhound's second flaw. Like all dog-like monsters, it was unable to pass over water, even at shallow depths. This gained him valuable time to shift his position. Despite the edge, Vakir knew he wasn't safe. The hellhound was persistent, its actions driven by a thirst for blood. As it jumped toward him again, Vakir carried out the final part of his plan. He threw a bloody bean directly into the beast's open mouth as it roared. The hellhound began to cry, its body shaking as it fell to the ground, unable to stir. Vakir smirked, explaining to himself that chocolate was harmful to canines, and the bloody bean, capable of producing 100 liters of chocolate from a single seed, acted like a strong poison for the hellhound. With the creature stopped, Vakir drew his blade and aimed for its weak point, the spot near its kidney where no ribs gave protection. With a quick and firm strike, he plunged his sword into the hellhound's exposed side, ending its life instantly. As the hellhound's energy or karma flowed into him, he felt his body grow tougher. His sword felt lighter in his grip, and he could sense himself getting nearer to regaining the strength he'd held before his regression, all while being just an 8-year-old child standing over the defeated hellhound. Vakir allowed himself a moment of pride. He pictured the look on Hugo's face when he returned to the clan with the head of a B-rank monster. Cutting off the hellhound's head as proof of his kill, he felt certain that he had already secured first place in the practical test. But his victory was brief. A low growl broke the quiet, and Vakir turned to see a pack of hellhounds nearing, their fiery eyes fixed on him. It was obvious they had come seeking vengeance for their fallen friend. Despite the odds, Vakir stayed calm. He knew their weaknesses well, and had enough bloody beans to turn the situation to his benefit. Holding his sword tightly, he prepared to face them. Before the hellhounds could attack, however, they suddenly began to whine, shrinking back in fear. This response immediately grabbed Vakir's notice. Hellhounds were famous for their relentless aggression and never retreated, even when facing death. Something had scared them far more than Vakir's bloodlust. Turning around, Vakir's eyes widened as he saw the cause of their terror. Towering before him stood a monstrous 3-headed beast, Cerberus, the legendary guardian of the underworld from Greek mythology. The creature was enormous, at least 7 meters tall, and radiated an aura of unmatched danger. With a risk rating of A, Cerberus was a being of unmatched power, far beyond the hellhounds Vakir had just fought. Vakir's mind raced. What is a Cerberus doing here? These monsters usually lived on the 7th ridge of Loup Rouge et Del Noir mountain, far from the assigned area of the test. But as he watched the creature more closely, he noticed something vital. Cerberus was bleeding. Multiple arrows were stuck in its massive body, and its movements were slower than usual. It was clear that someone or something had been hunting it, driving it to this lower ridge. Realizing the chance before him, Vakir quickly judged the situation. Despite its fabled strength, an injured Cerberus was far more manageable. He decided to strike. Drawing his blade, Vakir rushed forward, channeling all his skill into the fight. His body, strengthened by the Styx River, moved with accuracy and speed, and his weapons, carefully picked for this test, proved useful even against the mighty beast. Landing several hits on the Cerberus, Vakir's assurance grew. He relied on the sword skills he had sharpened through countless battles against the demon clans in his past life. With each strike, he pushed the massive creature closer to defeat. An injured Cerberus, this is doable, he thought, determination shining in his eyes. As the Cerberus roared in pain and struck back, Vakir knew the fight was far from over, but his chances of killing the A-rank monster seemed within reach. In a single moment of carelessness, Vakir found himself at the mercy of the Cerberus. With lightning-fast precision, the beast attacked. The first swipe of its claws shattered Vakir's sword, sending pieces scattering to the ground. The second blow hit him with tremendous force, hurling him through the air like a rag doll. Vakir's flight ended suddenly as his body slammed into a tree trunk with a sickening thud. Blood poured from his mouth as he crumpled to the ground, motionless and battered. For a moment everything was calm, then Vakir's eyes fluttered open, fear surging inside him as sharp agony shot through his left arm. His first thought was that the Cerberus had ripped the limb clean off, but to his relief his arm was still there, though severely hurt. He winced, understanding that the magical qualities of the Styx River likely saved him from total destruction. Thankful for its protection, he reminded himself that even its blessing had limits. He wouldn't survive another direct blow. The Cerberus advanced again, its 3 heads growling together. Their survival instincts kicked in as he barely dodged its next attack. He knew that raw strength wouldn't save him now. His years of hunting experience urged him to retreat, to find another path. Sometimes the best move was to live and battle another day. Swallowing his pride, Vakir turned and fled, his mind racing for a plan as he ran, scanning the landscape for options. He spotted hope, a rusty iron fence just a few yards ahead. If he could cross it, he'd be out of the dangerous zone and closer to the safe spot he'd prepared before this fight. Gathering every bit of energy, he pushed himself forward, his feet pounding the earth as the Cerberus roared behind him. Reaching the fence, Vakir hurled himself through the gate, just making it to the other side. Relief flooded through him, but he knew the struggle wasn't over. He had to reach the next part of his plan. Moving fast, he searched the woods, looking for his prepared trap. The sound of the Cerberus's chase drove him onward until he finally saw it, a deep hole hidden beneath leaves. As the Cerberus lunged, its huge jaws snapping shut just behind him, Vakir dived out of the way. The beast fell into the pit, impaling itself on wooden spikes hidden below. Vakir's lips curled into a grin. His preparation had worked. Each spike had been coated with the juice of bloody beans, turning them into a deadly poison for dog-like monsters. The Cerberus howled in pain, its growls turning to wet gurgles as foam oozed from its mouths. But Vakir knew better than to relax. The legendary creature was not defeated yet. It struggled to rise, its massive body shaking with effort, and began climbing out of the hole. He grabbed a wooden spike smeared with the venom of the bloody mamba snake and threw it with accuracy. The spike pierced the Cerberus's side, slowing its movements but not stopping it. The beast staggered forward, each step heavy with pain. Vakir counted the steps silently, his heart pounding in his chest. 1 step, 2, 3. The Cerberus kept approaching. 4, 5, 6. As it took the 7th step, it stumbled, its knees buckling. With a final earth-shaking groan, the Cerberus collapsed, lifeless at Vakir's feet. Vakir exhaled deeply, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. The poisonous spike, coated with the bloody mamba's venom, had worked, just as the story said. No creature could take more than 7 steps after being struck by it. He had hidden the spike long ago, saving it for the day when he might need it most. That day had come, and it had ensured his survival. As the immense power of the defeated Cerberus flowed into him, Vakir felt his body surge with newfound strength. Standing over the 3 lifeless heads of the legendary beast, he marveled at the energy coursing through him. As Vakir stood over the dead Cerberus, his thoughts shifted from his hard-won victory to a new, more urgent problem: how to move the massive body. The sight of the beast's 3 severed heads alone would be enough to prove his deed, but the manner of its death, the poison spikes and the venom's effects, would be clear to anyone examining it. He considered who might act as a witness to his triumph. Perhaps the guardian knight who had seen him carving the wooden spikes earlier would support him. However, a different idea sparked in Vakir's mind. The Cerberus was no ordinary monster. It was a gatekeeper. That meant one thing: it had been guarding something, likely a dungeon. His pulse quickened as the possibility of hidden treasure came to him. Dungeons were often the lairs of powerful creatures, their depths filled with rare items and vast riches. Determined to uncover what lay inside, he decided to explore. Before entering the dungeon, Vakir took a careful precaution. Scooping up a handful of the Cerberus's foul-smelling waste, he smeared it on his body. The stench would act as a barrier to smaller monsters that might cross his path, hiding his scent from predators. With his senses sharp and his resolve firm, he began tracking the Cerberus's trail through the forest. The path was clear to his trained eyes. Dry soil, rotting leaves, and disturbed roots guided him back toward the source. As Vakir followed the trail, recognition hit him. This wasn't just any dungeon. It was one he had learned about in his past life. It would be discovered a decade from now, but by then it would already have been looted, its treasures long gone. Right now, however, the dungeon felt alive with magic emanating from beneath the surface. It was a rare opportunity, one he couldn't pass up. Approaching the dungeon's entrance cautiously, Vakir noted the heavy darkness within. The lack of light suggested that the dungeon was much deeper than he expected. Undeterred, his crimson eyes glowed faintly with excitement as he stepped inside. Each step echoed softly in the silence, heightening his anticipation of what lay ahead. The deeper Vakir ventured, the more wonders he encountered. Scattered throughout the dungeon were veins of ruby minerals, their faint glimmers lighting the walls. He deduced that these veins were likely linked to the nearby Red All Mountain, a famous source of valuable gems. As he pushed forward, a spark of light appeared ahead, urging him to hasten his pace. Soon, Vakir entered a brightly lit chamber that stole his breath. At its center stood a huge ruby, mounted atop a stone pillar, radiating an intense, unearthly glow. He could tell at a glance that the gem was filled with mana, its brilliance far beyond that of an ordinary jewel. The sight was captivating, and for a moment he simply admired its beauty, but his awe was disrupted when he noticed something disturbing nearby: a skeleton lying crumpled on the ground. As he approached the remains, the signs of violence became clear. The bones were broken, with deep stab wounds visible in the fragile frame. Brown, dried blood stained the floor around it, suggesting that the victim had died long ago. Vakir knelt beside the skeleton, his keen mind already piecing together clues. Lying beside the remains was a letter, its edges worn with age. Curiosity sparked, Vakir picked it up and began to read. The writer introduced himself as Cain, but avoided marking the paper with his full name. As Vakir read further, his eyes narrowed in recognition. The handwriting was unmistakably that of a Baskerville. Could Cain have been a member of his family? The letter revealed a grim tale. Cain and his brother Abel had stumbled upon this fabled stone chamber, a place spoken of in Baskerville lore for generations. Together they navigated countless trials and defeated mighty monsters to reach this legendary location. But their journey ended here, where the final trial trapped them for 3 painful years. Vakir's mind churned as he absorbed the weight of their sacrifice. What treasure within this dungeon could possibly have been worth such torment? Vakir's attention was drawn back to the splendid ruby at the chamber's center. Its glow seemed to call him, and he realized it must be the key to unlocking the dungeon's final challenge. Approaching cautiously, he read the eerie riddle inscribed on the monument aloud. When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. The words were puzzling, and their meaning escaped him. He recalled from Cain's letter that both Cain and Abel had wrestled with this very puzzle. The letter recounted their dark conclusion. As twins separated at birth, they believed the riddle required them to become one again. This interpretation had led to tragedy. Cain killed his own brother in a fierce fight, hoping their union in death would fulfill the riddle's condition. Yet, even after Abel's death, the treasure remained out of reach. Cain, filled with regret, left the dungeon empty-handed, warning future visitors of its cruelty. His letter described the dungeon as a devil's lair, a place that preyed on human greed and ambition, offering nothing but despair. Vakir absorbed the story, his mind racing as he reread the riddle. Unlike Cain and Abel, he had no twin, and he felt certain the brothers had misread the puzzle's true meaning. The words echoed in his head. When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. Vakir refused to give in to despair. He was determined to triumph where Cain and Abel had failed. Examining the chamber closely, his sharp mind began piecing together the clues. His eyes lingered on the skeleton, a grim reminder of Cain and Abel's downfall before shifting to the ruby at the center of the room. The riddle's focus on 1 and 2 suddenly clicked. The answer wasn't about people, it was about shadows. Vakir strode toward the ruby, his thoughts aligning with clarity. The dark passageway leading into the chamber had cast only his shadowless form. Upon stepping into the ruby's light, however, he became 2, himself and the shadow created by the glowing gem. And when the light vanished, the shadow would disappear, leaving only 1 again. Vakir didn't hesitate. Drawing his weapon, he struck the ruby with precision. The gem shattered into pieces, its dazzling light snuffed out in an instant. A flash of brilliance lit the chamber as the ruby broke, revealing what the dungeon had been guarding. Vakir's breath caught as he laid eyes on the treasure hidden within. At the center of the newly revealed chamber stood a sword, exuding a sinister, unearthly aura. It was embedded in a stone, as though waiting for its chosen wielder. The air around the weapon felt heavy with malice, and its very presence radiated a tangible sense of dread. His gaze fell upon the inscription carved into the stone beneath the blade. "Only those with Baskerville's blood may claim me." Vakir's eyes widened in shock. This sword, brimming with demonic energy, was not just any weapon. It was the legendary Beelzebub. The name stirred long-buried memories from his childhood. He recalled an old picture book depicting the gluttonous fly, Beelzebub, a monstrous entity from ancient tales. The story spoke of Beelzebub as one of the 7 calamities, part of the devil's holy constellation. According to the tales, the 7 great families, including the Baskervilles, had risen to fight these cataclysmic entities, each family facing a fragment of their immense power. The first Baskerville patriarch had battled Beelzebub, sealing its remnants within the family's lands. Most dismissed these accounts as myths, but Vakir now knew the truth. The sword before him, imbued with Beelzebub's evil energy, was proof that the legends were real. The realization hit Vakir like a thunderbolt. This weapon, steeped in demonic power, was both a symbol of his family's legacy and a sign of immense danger. Vakir's eyes remained fixed on the blade before him, recalling the blood-soaked history tied to its edge. This weapon, Beelzebub's sword, had once been wielded by the demon clans, leaving a trail of countless human deaths across battlefields. Determined to ensure it would never fall into their hands again, Vakir reached for the hilt, declaring, "This sword is mine now." As he grasped the hilt, an intense energy surged through his body, catching him off guard. With a gasp, he felt the blade respond to his touch, vanishing from sight only to reappear moments later, fused to his hand. Vakir marveled as the blade seemed to emerge directly from his palm, radiating a faint but ominous aura. Holding the blade in awe, Vakir realized this weapon was no ordinary relic. It was forged from the remains of a devil's holy constellation, and its potential filled him with excitement. A grin spread across his face as he wondered how much stronger he could become in this life with such a weapon at his side. After thoroughly exploring the dungeon and confirming there was nothing else of worth, Vakir decided to depart. But just as he neared the exit, a peculiar feeling overtook him. His sight blurred, his legs weakened, and he fell to his knees, gripping his belly in agony. At first he thought it was his own starvation, but he soon grasped the reality. It was the sword's craving. Beelzebub's relentless hunger was now tied to him. Staggering out of the dungeon, Vakir sensed the blade pulling at him, guiding him in a certain path. Unable to resist its force, he dashed, following the weapon's lead. It brought him back to the body of the hellhound he had killed earlier. Surprised, Vakir held the sword toward the corpse, observing as Beelzebub consumed the hellhound's blood with a ravenous appetite. As the blade fed, Vakir's own hunger eased. He couldn't help but ponder if the blade's unending craving had caused the barren trees and parched ground on the mountain. After the sword finished eating, it let out a content noise, similar to a child completing a meal. Vakir, however, felt a pang of irritation at the blade's erratic nature. Despite its vast power, using such a weapon would demand careful control. He inspected the blade more closely, noting its distinct slots and the powers it had taken. The sword's natural ability, gluttonous flies, allowed it to soak up the skills of its foes, making it a fearsome tool in combat. However, the nearly endless capacity of this ability had left many of its past victims weak and outdated. Vakir knew the sword was perilous, and he resolved to restrict its consumption to 3 abilities at a time, no more. Examining the first slot, he found the skill Hemorrhage Hellhound B, gained from the hellhound's body. This power would cause the blade to steadily draw out an opponent's blood through even the tiniest cuts. It was a terrifyingly potent skill, ideal for drawn-out battles. His gaze shifted toward Cerberus's massive corpse, an idea taking shape in his mind. He extended Beelzebub toward the body, allowing the blade to begin its task. However, Vakir halted it before it could devour the entire corpse, warning that the remains needed to stay whole for the upcoming examination. Lightly tapping the sword as if scolding a pet, he muttered, "Enough." The blade responded with a sharp wail, almost like a scolded child. Now Beelzebub's 3 slots were filled. 1. Incinerate from Cerberus A, an ability to inflict severe burning wounds resistant to healing. 2. Hemorrhage from Hellhound B, a skill that worsens blood loss from even the smallest scratches. 3. High-speed regeneration from Brown Rat F, a minor healing ability likely from an unknown enemy. Vakir was momentarily confused by the sudden gain of the high-speed regeneration ability, until he noticed a crushed sewer rat under the massive Cerberus. Realizing that Beelzebub had absorbed the rat's skill alongside the others, he felt a mix of amusement and practicality. Though minor compared to the Burn Wound Cerberus or Hemorrhage Hellhound skills, the regeneration ability could still prove handy. He also reflected on the incredible strength of the Incinerate Cerberus ability, knowing that thermal injuries caused excruciating pain, far worse than the effects of hemorrhage. With his preparations for the test complete, Vakir decided to stay near Cerberus's remains until the practical exam officially ended. When the young hounds returned to Baskerville, the clan elders began assessing their performances. Each hound received a prize crafted from the remains of the creatures they had hunted, a sword, shield, or necklace symbolizing their triumph. However, one hound stood out from the rest, leaving a lasting mark on all who witnessed the evaluations. In his office, Patriarch Hugo van Baskerville sat in his chair, eyebrows raised in astonishment. Turning to his head butler, John Barrymore, he asked, "Who caught what?" Barrymore responded dutifully, "Master Vakir van Baskerville, the 8-year-old Hound, hunted the Cerberus, a high-ranking monster that accidentally wandered into the restricted area during the exam." Hugo's surprise grew. Even the family's guardian knights often avoided facing such dangerous beasts, yet Vakir had managed to defeat one. Barrymore continued, explaining that the Cerberus had been injured by the barbarian tribe before Vakir encountered it. The young Hound had then applied poison to his wooden spear, ensuring the beast's downfall. However, the exact nature of the poison was unknown, and Vakir had provided no explanation in his hunting journal. When Hugo asked why Vakir hadn't clarified this detail, Barrymore noted that the boy had retired to his dorm, claiming he was weary. Amused, Hugo chuckled, remarking, "The little rascal is already so cunning. Information is power, and power has its worth." Barrymore, still astonished, voiced his thoughts. "It's surprising that such talent comes from a hound named Van rather than L." Hugo dismissed the notion of bloodline with a smirk. "I do not judge hounds by their lineage. I raise them for their skill and their drive. Even mutts can rise to greatness." His tone made it clear that in Baskerville, ability and ambition outweighed noble birth. Though Barrymore considered whether Hugo was worried about his second son, who was currently undergoing isolation training, he chose not to voice his speculation. Instead, he simply apologized for his earlier comment. Hugo waved it off, mentioning that he needed something to lift his mood. Barrymore immediately offered to summon Vakir, which Hugo agreed to with a nod. When Vakir entered Hugo's office, he appeared calm and confident. Hugo wasted no time questioning Vakir about his success in hunting the Cerberus. With calm precision, Vakir revealed that he had used chocolate as a poison, exploiting its deadly effect on canine monsters. The explanation left Hugo momentarily stunned. He quickly connected the dots, realizing that Vakir's earlier request for chocolate had been part of his plan. Barrymore, standing nearby, was equally taken aback. However, his attention shifted to the unspoken tension between the two. The lack of formal greetings struck him as odd, leading him to wonder if this was truly the interaction of a father and son. The conversation continued, with Hugo inquiring why Vakir had refused to provide an explanation to Barrymore earlier. Vakir's response was brief but pointed. "The butler is not my leader." Hugo raised an eyebrow and asked, "Then who is your leader?" Without hesitation, Vakir replied, "I belong to the clan. The master of the clan is my master as well." Hugo smirked as he addressed Vakir, congratulating him on his outstanding performance during the practical exam. As a reward, Hugo declared that the Cerberus's corpse and all associated materials would belong solely to Vakir. Furthermore, as the highest scorer, Vakir was granted a special privilege, the chance to make a wish. Vakir's eyes brightened at the prospect. Without hesitation, he requested access to the 10,000-book library, one of the largest and most prestigious repositories of knowledge in the Empire, located deep within the Baskerville clan's territory. The library was a stronghold of forbidden techniques and secrets, accessible only to the Patriarch, the second-in-command, and their direct descendants. Hugo's eyebrows rose at the unexpected request. He reminded Vakir of the strict rules governing access, making it clear that illegitimate children were not permitted entry. Undeterred, Vakir calmly replied that he would accept the decision if access was denied, though inwardly he was already devising a plan to sneak in if necessary. To Vakir's astonishment, Hugo granted him permission, leaving him momentarily speechless. But Hugo didn't stop there. He instructed Vakir to specifically seek out the Baskerville 6 technique, located in the 6th restricted zone of the library, a place even legitimate children of the family rarely ventured. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on Vakir. No illegitimate child had ever been granted access beyond the 4th technique, much less the 6th. Though he kept his composure, his mind raced as he tried to discern Hugo's intentions. Why would he give me this chance? Even so, Vakir reminded himself that the 6th technique, while impressive, was still far below Hugo's own level. Before his regression, Hugo had mastered the Baskerville 7th technique and wielded the legendary power to bear 9 fangs. Vakir, however, had no intention of stopping at the 6th or even the 7th technique. His goal was clear: to surpass Hugo and claim the ultimate prize, the textbook of swordsmanship containing the teachings of the first Baskerville patriarch, who had subdued the 7 great disasters. This was the foundation of the clan's unmatched legacy, and Vakir knew it held the key to his success. Hugo smiled faintly, wishing Vakir good luck. Bowing in gratitude, Vakir thanked him. Inside, he couldn't help but marvel at how Hugo had unknowingly handed him an opportunity of immense value. He doesn't realize what he's given me, Vakir thought, but it doesn't matter. Vakir was determined to make the most of it and grow beyond all expectations.